Hello everyone and welcome to another video on the Cycling Day YouTube channel. Today we'll look at the 2019 edition of the Giro d'Emilia, which is a famous Italian autumn race. The race was a 209km hilly course that finished with 5 ascents up the famous San Luca climb in Bologna. Incidentally, the climb was also used in the opening stage of the 2019 Giro d'Italia, which was won by none other than Primoz Roglic himself. The San Luca climb is around 2 kilometers long and has an undulating profile with the hardest section averaging 16.5% in gradient, which makes it very hard to get into a constant climbing rhythm for the riders. Just on a side note, I actually cycled up this climb on a rental bike the day before the Giro d'Italia stage, and if you want to see me suffering, you can click here. Anyways, back to the race. This race was the first direct duel between Egan Bernal of Team Ineos and Primoz Roglic of Jumbo-Visma after they both won their respective first Grand Tours, Bernal the Tour de France and Roglic the Vuelta España. We did actually have all the winners of all the Grand Tours, as the Giro d'Italia champion Richard Carapaz was actually in the race, but he didn't actually feature in the finale and he didn't finish the race. Before the race, everyone was also hoping for a showdown between the two strong teams of Team Ineos and Team Jumbo-Visma on San Luca. We joined the race with 11 kilometers to go and we're on the penultimate time up San Luca before the finishing rep. Ciccone of Trek Segafredo and Pierre Latour of AG2R have a small advantage with the peloton in the background fast approaching. We get our first glimpses of the wrestling match between Jumbo-Visma and Ineos at the front trying to take control, with two of their domestiques actually gapping the rest of the field. Vincenzo Nibali is also in the race and tucks in behind the Ineos rider. Jakob Fuglsang can also be seen in this shot, so it was really a star-studded affair for this end-of-season race. Pierre Latour and Ciccone's advantage looks very shaky at this point, with the hardest part of the climb approaching. The leading duo turn under the walk passage, and now what will greet them is two corners before the hardest section of this climb, which shoots up to 20%. Just as a side note, the record on Strava is currently held by Vincenzo Nibali at a time of 5 minutes and 44 seconds in 2017 for the 2017 edition of this race, which was incidentally won by Giovanni Visconti, but that was for the whole climb. Latour leads the duo into the hardest section of the climb, and from the helicopter shot we can see how little of a gap the two actually have to the heavily reduced chasing peloton. Ciccone gets to the front and you can see that they're both struggling as they're getting out of the saddle to climb up this very steep section. The next shot we get is the back of the chasers, which shows the damage the steep section has already inflicted on this group. And for me, it really invokes some painful memories going up this climb. At the front of the chasers, we see all the leaders gathered and they're basically climbing up together. Egan Bernal is the first of the favourites to flex his muscles as he's not content with this pace. Fuglsang is the first to respond. Fuglsang then moves past the Tour de France champion to up the pace himself, with Nibali and Roglic locked on Bernal's wheel. Michael Woods, Alejandro Valverde and Sebastian Reichenbach, the Swiss champion, are also trying to follow. Next we see probably one of the best helicopter shots I've ever seen in a race, indicating not only the hill but also Bologna in the background. Anyways, the chasers come around the corner and we can see that the lead of the duo is virtually evaporated now, with only Ciccone having a few seconds of a lead and struggling to stay away, but Fuglsang with Bernal on his wheel catches this Trek Segafredo rider. At the top of San Luca, the group has been filtered down to 7 riders, and no one is quick to take up the work at the front as they all have the final ascent in mind. Roglic is the first to cross what will be the finish line and gets ready for the descent. Roglic is quick to stay at the front to guide the lead group down the descent, but it's not really at a fast pace, more cautious, if you will. Fuglsang takes up the front of this thinning elite group. Valverde, a notoriously fast descender, ups the tempo and almost distance Fuglsang and Egan Bernal at the back. As the pace slows, a Trek Segafredo rider and a FDJ rider decide to attack off the front, and we can see moments later that it's actually Brambilla and Rudy Mola, and they're quickly joined by UAE Team Emirates rider Diego Ulissi. In the group behind, no one seems in any rush to close down the growing gap to the trio at the front. With 5 kilometers left, the trio is still driving hard down the climb, and they have a gap of 19 seconds to the chasers. Down the descent, the trio are joined by a Colombian duo of Sergio Higuita and none other than Esteban Chavez, which is now a very dangerous group to give such an advantage to. Brambilla reluctantly leads the group for a bit before seizing his turn, and when we next see the chasing group, we can see it has swelled in size, probably due to the indecisiveness of the star riders willing to work together. The 5-man group are the first to race into the streets of Bologna and are still able to maintain a 13-second gap as Jumbo-Visma are leading the charge for Primoz Roglic. As the chasers turn up to the foot of San Luca, the advantage of the 5 riders is quickly fleeting and the showdown up San Luca is finally upon us. Diego Ulissi desperately tries to distance himself from his breakaway companions, and from the helicopter shot we can see that the chasers are rapidly closing them down. Just as a reminder, we are currently on the first section, which is hard, before we enter the next easier section, which is about 6 to 7%, and then we finally meet the hardest part of the climb before the final gradual incline. Diego Rosa for Team Ineos is now the one leading up the chasers and with all the strongest riders in the race on his wheel. Surprisingly, Vincenzo Nibali is the first big name who has had enough, and he won't be replicating his 2017 podium finish nor challenging his 2017 KOM. The lead group still has a minuscule advantage to the chasers, with the hardest part of the climb almost upon them. Ulissi and Brambilla look equally spent at the front, and Ulissi seems to sigh as he looks around, as he knows what is in store, as he sees the leaders clawing back the advantage in the background. Diego Rosa is doing a monster turn to bring back the leaders, and I suspect he will just stop on the steep bit of the climb. Just before the leaders pass under the walk passage, Diego Rosa managed to make the catch to the 5 escapees. Several riders move up in the field as we come under the passage to get a better position for the climb, as the road is quite narrow. Moments later we see the effort set into Diego Rosa, the monster turn he did, as he drops from first in the field all the way through and filters through the group to eventually getting spat. Mike Woods looks comfortable at the front, with him distancing the other riders slightly, and here we can see which of these big GC riders are actually comfortable on these steep, shorter inclines as opposed to long alpine climbs. From the helicopter shot, we can see Roglic upping the pace, with Ulissi and Mollard dropping off the back, and Egan Bernal being the only rider able to close the gap between him and Roglic. Near the top, the moment that all Colombian fans were dreading happens. The effort that Egan Bernal did in order to close the slight gap to Primoz Roglic costs him dearly, as he's dropped at this point. Now, Primoz Roglic, after discarding a suffering Mike Woods, proceeds to solo towards the finish. He gets to the flatter section of the climb and he has already built up a massive advantage, and just by looking at his cadence, it's very fast and very fluid and not fatigued at all. Behind Roglic, we have the EF Education duo of Mike Woods and Sergio Higuita making the lone chase, and the rest of the riders have well and truly been dispatched by Roglic on the climb. Roglic celebrates for the first time on San Luca as he takes his second win on the top of the climb, but he couldn't celebrate the time trial, while behind him, Higuita doesn't challenge his teammate for the second place on the podium. A very dominant performance by Jumbo-Visma and the Vuelta España champion. This should be one of the many battles to come with Ineos and Jumbo-Visma. That's it for this video. Make sure to let me know down in the comments if there are any old races you want me to look at, and if you're new to the channel, why not check out some of my other videos, such as when Mathieu van der Poel won the GP de Nan, or when Roglic became the Slovenian national champion this year. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time on the Cycling Dane channel.